She was supposed to be dead, Lauren screamed, Nora's only daughter, caught mid-lie in open court. Nora didn't blink, just stood there, cane in hand, listening to her own child's betrayal on ICU audio. Across the aisle, Ben, her son-in-law, was already in cuffs for identity theft. The judge's gavel slammed. This was a coordinated attempt to erase your own mother. From the back row, Mira, Nora's estranged niece, stood up, subpoena in hand. And in Nora's coat pocket, the final will, signed and sealed, with no family left inside it. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The fluorescent light above her flickered like a nervous pulse, a cold rhythm Nora couldn't match. Everything smelled like bleach and rust. Plastic tubes tangled around her like puppet strings, tugging softly at her wrists and neck. Her mouth was dry, her throat scorched, but she wasn't dead. Not yet. She knew that much. Voices floated in from the hallway, clear but muffled by the heavy ICU door. A woman's laugh, nervous, shrill, then a man, low and clipped. Nora blinked slowly. A shape moved past her peripheral vision, blurred. She focused. Her daughter, Lauren. Slender, dark-haired, arms crossed tightly across her chest like she was hugging bad news. "She's not coming back from this," Lauren said. "We need to be realistic." Ben's voice followed, flat as a countertop. "The realtor's ready to list. I told him midweek." Nora's chest fluttered, not with fear, but with instinct. Survive. Stay still. Don't let them know. "She'll want the antiques appraised," Ben said. "Then she should have taken better care of herself." Lauren snapped gum between her teeth like punctuation. "The jewelry's already boxed. I'll go by the bank after this. She kept the good stuff in the safe deposit box, remember?" Nora tried to move her fingers. Just one. Prove to herself she could. They twitched. Good. She was there, awake, aware, anchored in a body that had betrayed her, but a mind that hadn't. "I'll need your signature for the power of attorney transfer," Ben said. "Your mom never updated it. Still in her name." "Then forge it. She can't even talk. No one's checking." Forge. That word hit Nora like a steel rod to the gut. She wanted to scream, to rip the IV from her arm and spit truth in her daughter's face, but she stayed still. Let them think she was somewhere between worlds. Comatose. Easier to plan their theft. Lauren stepped closer, heels clicking softly against tile. She leaned over Nora's bed. "She's hanging on, but she won't make it," she said, too loud, too sure. "Let's just start clearing the house." Nora stared through her. The betrayal wrapped tight around her ribs like barbed wire. Not just greed, this was calculation. Cold, practiced cruelty. Ben's voice drifted in again. "What about the safe in the garage?" Lauren scoffed. "You think she remembers the combo? Please." Nora did remember. She remembered the brass dial, the way the fourth number always stuck just a little. She remembered everything, and she started filing it, cataloging each word, each lie, each stolen piece of her life. They thought she was done. They thought she was silent and fading. But Nora was listening, not just with her ears, with every nerve in her body. She began to trace names in her mind, people she trusted, people she'd need. Greg, the lawyer who handled her husband's will. Arlene, her neighbor who always noticed when things were off. And Frank, her old friend who had once been a locksmith, back when everything was analog and life was less slippery. Her breath rasped through the oxygen tube. It hurt. Good. Pain meant presence. Lauren's perfume lingered after she walked out. Sweet, synthetic, like spoiled candy. Nora clenched her jaw and waited for the door to hiss closed again. A nurse passed by, humming faintly to herself. A monitor beeped. Nora stared at the ceiling, at the hairline crack above the flickering light. That tiny flaw in a room built for silence. She let her tears come, but they didn't fall from grief. They fell from rage. Betrayal burns cold, and in that freezing fire, Nora made a decision. If I live through this, she thought, she loses everything. Her monitor beeped faster. From outside, Lauren's voice rose again. We'll need to cancel her Social Security just in case. I'll call first thing." Nora turned her head an inch, an act that cost her dearly. She stared at the door, memorizing its frame, the direction it opened, the weakness in the hinge. Her pulse settled, her eyes narrowed. And in the silence of the ICU, Nora began to plan the kind of survival that would make them both wish she hadn't. The next morning, Nora blinked through the fog of morphine and fluorescent light. The haze was thinner now. She could feel her limbs. She could count the seconds between beeps on the heart monitor. Her hands itched to move, to act, but not yet. Timing, her husband used to say, is the difference between a reaction and a strategy. She turned her head barely an inch as the nurse fluffed her pillow and adjusted the drip. "There we go, sweetheart. You're doing better today," the nurse whispered gently, not expecting an answer. Nora gave a small, crooked twitch of her lip. Let them think it was involuntary. Outside her door, Lauren's voice drifted in again. Always too loud, always too certain. "No, she hasn't been coherent since the stroke. Honestly, I don't know why they're keeping her here. We're managing her affairs now, medical, legal, financial." "Are you the power of attorney?" a nurse asked. "Yes," Lauren lied smoothly. "She signed it years ago, before the dementia kicked in." Nora's jaw tightened under the oxygen mask. Dementia? She could still recall the date her husband added her to the deed, May 4th, 1986. She'd just had her second cup of coffee when he came home grinning, waving the paperwork like a flag. "You're on everything now, babe. No one can push you out." She remembered the way he'd insisted she memorize their trust lawyer's number. Just in case. And the code phrase they used when anything felt off. Peach cobbler. He'd made her say it every year on their anniversary, like a ridiculous but meaningful oath. She remembered it all. She remembered enough. Later that afternoon, she watched from her hospital bed as Lauren scrolled through photos on her phone. Nora's china cabinet, her living room rugs, even the old iron key that hung from a leather strap behind the pantry door. "She's not coming home," Lauren said to Ben over the phone. "We might as well start staging. People don't buy empty houses." That word, staging, burned through her like acid. Lauren had already been inside, had already touched her things. Nora's fingers curled slightly. She felt the tape of the fourth stretch. A nurse walked by. Nora blinked fast, playing at confusion, letting her head lull slightly to the side. Let them think she was floating, not calculating. That evening, as the room dimmed and machines hummed around her like white noise, she began to silently inventory every room in the house. The old sewing machine in the guest bedroom, still stuffed with bills and documents from before the internet era. The shoebox tucked behind the third row of books in the study, where her husband had hidden their original marriage certificate, the antique coin collection under the stairs, the spare keys, and the real safe. Not the obvious one in the garage. The second one, the one no one knew about. Lauren thought she was robbing a house. She didn't realize she was setting off a war. The door creaked. A shadow spilled across the tile. Lauren again holding a takeout bag and wearing that same casual cruelty on her face. She looked around to make sure no nurses were nearby, then leaned close to the bed. "I'll bring your things by the facility," she whispered. "It's nicer there, safer, and we'll take care of everything." She set the bag on the side table, untouched. Then she kissed the air near Nora's cheek, fake and cold as winter breath. As the door closed behind her, Nora's eyes fluttered open, sharp and alert in the dark. Facility? She wasn't going anywhere, but home. And Lauren wasn't taking anything but the consequences. Outside her window, a storm rolled in, late spring thunder rumbling low like a warning. Nora shifted just enough to make the oxygen monitor spike, drawing the attention of the night nurse. "She's moving more," the nurse said aloud, jotting notes on a clipboard. "Could be a sign of cognitive improvement." Nora let her eyes close again. The corners of her mouth twitched into the ghost of a smile. The whisper plan was in motion. All she needed now was time. The town car pulled up slowly to the curb in front of the craftsman-style home Nora had lived in for 42 years. The porch light was on, not for her, but for inventory. The driver didn't say much, just opened the door and offered an arm Nora didn't take. She gripped her cane, steadied herself with a quiet breath, and stepped out into the damp smell of early June. Her bones hurt, but her mind was ablaze. She hadn't called ahead. The wheelchair the hospital had insisted on was folded in the trunk. She hadn't used it once. As she stepped onto the porch, she noticed the begonias were gone. So were the hanging bird feeders. Even the welcome mat had been rolled up and replaced with something cold and clean. By appointment only. Nora reached into her coat pocket and pulled out her old key. She slid it into the front door lock and stopped. It didn't turn. New lock, new code, not even subtle. She knocked. Inside, she heard muffled footsteps, quick, uneven, and then the door cracked open an inch. Lauren's face was the first thing she saw. Mascara streaked, mouth slack, hand trembling slightly on the knob. Behind her, the sound of bubble wrap being torn echoed like bones breaking. "Mom?" Lauren breathed. "Oh my God, what are you doing here?" Nora gave her a long, unread, able look. "I was discharged." "No one told us. You should have called. We would have—" "You weren't expecting me," Nora said softly. Clearly. Behind Lauren, the living room was barely recognizable. The rug was rolled, the walls bare. Her late husband's recliner was gone. The mahogany curio cabinet, the one she swore she'd die owning, was missing. What remained was boxed and labeled: charity, appraisal, storage. Family photos, the silver-framed ones that had lined the hallway for years, were nowhere to be seen. Lauren stepped aside, her voice cracking into feigned emotion. We were just trying to stay busy. We didn't think we thought—" She choked back a sob. "We thought we'd lost you." Nora stepped inside, her cane tapping once against the hardwood. She said nothing, just looked. In the corner, Ben stood mid-tape wrap, a half-sealed box in his hands labeled "Office Valuables." He froze, color draining from his face like spilled milk. Nora met his eyes briefly, then turned to Lauren with a gentle nod. "Well," she said, voice calm and sharp as dry ice. "I'm not lost." She walked deeper into the room, slowly. Every inch told her something. The safe from the garage had been dragged out, likely pried open. Cabinets were half empty. A stack of mail sat unsorted, Nora's name scratched off every envelope. She counted 6 boxes marked estate. She tapped her cane against a crate filled with her cookbooks. "You're packing fast." Lauren wrung her hands. "It was a mistake. We got overwhelmed. Ben didn't want the house to sit unattended. You understand?" "I understand people's priorities get very clear when they think they're alone with a vault," Nora said mildly. She pulled her phone from her coat pocket and, without fanfare, tapped once on the screen. A small red light blinked. Recording. Lauren paled. "You're not well, Mom," she began. "You shouldn't be—" "I'm well enough to be standing in my own home," Nora said. Ben shifted behind a half-unpacked box, silent now, calculating. Nora's gaze moved to the front door again, the lock glinting like a dare. "New locks?" she asked. Lauren hesitated, then nodded. "For safety. You know how the neighborhood's changed." Nora turned toward the hallway, noting the dust trail leading from the bedroom. Her jewelry box was missing. She took another measured step and leaned slightly against the wall to ease the pain in her hip. "Well," she said, "we'll need to change those locks again." She reached into her coat pocket, her fingers brushing over a worn business card. Frank Maynard, lock and key specialist, retired, but not rusty. Nora didn't call him now. She'd wait. She wasn't going to barge back in with fire and accusations. She was going to let them think this was a reunion, not a return to power. Behind her, Lauren's voice cracked with more practiced sorrow. "Let me get you some tea. Sit down, please." Nora nodded, stepped into the kitchen, and saw it. The space on the countertop where the ceramic jar used to sit. It was gone. That jar hadn't just held cookies, it had held the original copy of the will. She steadied herself, back ramrod straight. This wasn't recovery, it was reconnaissance. And tomorrow morning, the locksmith would have coffee waiting. Nora moved through her own house like a ghost, unseen, untrusted, uninvited, Every floorboard that creaked beneath her cane felt like a betrayal. Every room had been violated. And yet, none of it looked like a break-in. It looked like permission. She stood in the hallway, staring at the empty space where the family photo gallery had once lived. Dozens of frames had vanished, their sun-bleached outlines still marking the eggshell wall. The hallway looked sterile now, like a model home. "You said we could prep the house to sell." Lauren's voice floated in from the den, sweet, casual, weaponized. Nora turned slowly, her expression blank. "Did I?" "Yes," Lauren replied too quickly, standing beside a decorative box labeled "Scented Candles." "Staging. You told me, remember? Right after the first seizure. You said, if anything happens, don't let the house fall apart. So, we've just been cleaning. Sorting." Nora tilted her head slightly. "I must have forgotten." Lauren smiled thinly. "It's okay, Mom. You've been through a lot. The doctor said you might have lapses. Short term, I mean. Nothing to worry about." Nora held her gaze, then blinked slowly, just enough to suggest uncertainty. "I see." Lauren's eyes sparkled with relief. "Is there someone interested in the house?" Nora asked lightly. "Actually, yes," Lauren said, warming to her lie. "There's an investor from Santa Fe. All cash, no inspection. They just need the title clear and the house empty." Nora nodded. "Sounds fast." "That's the market, Mom." Lauren pulled a box of files closer to her. "You've been out of the loop a while. People don't wait these days." "No," Nora murmured. "They don't." Lauren excused herself to take a quick call from the backyard. Nor watched her disappear through the patio doors. Phone already pressed to her ear, the performance activated. As soon as the sliding door shut, Nora moved. Her joints ached, but her instincts were intact. She headed to the mudroom, where Lauren had dumped her oversized leather tote earlier that morning. The tote was sprawled open, careless in its arrogance. Nora reached inside. Receipts, junk mail, a lavender pill organizer, and then an envelope with the corner torn off, stamped in red. First Citizens Bank, Private Account Division. Inside were 2 printed authorization forms. Nora's name was signed at the bottom of both, but the signature was a forgery. She knew it instantly. Too neat, too wide, and missing the tiny flourish her hand always added at the tail of the N, a detail no one but her husband would have noticed, or cared about. She snapped a quick photo on her phone. Behind the envelope, another document peeked out, one of Ben's business cards, stapled to a page marked ACH Transfer. The amount made her jaw tighten. $42,000. That wasn't staging money. That was theft, mid-job. She tucked everything back precisely, noting how each item had been positioned. No mistakes, no ripples. Ghosts didn't leave fingerprints. Outside, Lauren laughed into her phone. "Of course she doesn't remember. I'm handling it. Don't worry." Nora quietly backed away and headed toward the side door. She needed air. And answers. The driveway was empty, but Ben's car sat crooked along the curb. She moved toward it slowly, noticing the passenger window was cracked. Unlocked. She slipped inside, heart hammering. The glove compartment was stuffed with fast food napkins and insurance paperwork, but behind a warped copy of Sportsman Quarterly, she found a yellow envelope labeled simply, "Wills and Deeds." Inside, photocopies of her living trust, an unsigned quitclaim deed, and a handwritten list of banks with check marks beside 3 of them. Beside First Citizens, Ben had scribbled, "Transfer complete. Need routing for joint CD." She took photos of everything. As she climbed out, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. "Frank Maynard. You're booked for 7:30 tomorrow. You want me to bring the high-grade locks?" She typed one word in reply. "Yes." And then she looked up and saw Ben watching her from the kitchen window. Their eyes met. He didn't wave. Neither did she. By 8:15 a.m., Nora was seated at her breakfast nook, porcelain teacup in hand, wrapped in the same wool cardigan she'd worn the morning she buried her husband. Her silver hair was tied into a loose knot, makeup minimal but intentional, enough to look frail, not fragile. Across from her, at the head of the table, sat Sharon McKee, neighbor, mother of 4, licensed realtor, and more importantly, someone who remembered when Nora used to lead the neighborhood watch meetings. Nora spoke softly. I don't need a full listing, not yet, just an appraisal, quiet, private. Sharon gave a cautious nod. You sure? Word is Lauren's been showing the house already. Uninvited, Nora said evenly. To strangers. With no ownership. Sharon exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing as she clicked open her tablet. All right, I'll handle this off-market. I've got a cash buyer who specializes in high-value estates. Doesn't need inspection, just wants clean title and no drama. No promises on that last one, Nora murmured. Sharon laughed gently. I'll be discreet. You'll get an offer before Lauren even hears a whisper. They spent 20 minutes reviewing comps and setting up a walkthrough for Saturday morning before Lauren's usual errand hours. Sharon left through the side gate. Nora watched her go, then picked up her phone and dialed Greg. Her lawyer picked up on the second ring. I've been expecting this call. I need to move fast, she said. Can we restructure the deed? We can, Greg replied. With your medical clearance and a clean title, I'll reassign ownership solely to you and lock down any claims Lauren's made. I'll also initiate a cease and desist on any attempts to represent you financially. And the forged authorization docs? Already forwarded to our fraud investigator. If you get another doctor's letter declaring you incapacitated, send it to me. Nora paused. What if I told you one's already been submitted? Then she's gambling with felony charges. Nora smiled faintly. Good. That afternoon, she lay on the living room sofa, blanket over her lap, face pale beneath the light. She made no effort to look stronger than she felt. Lauren burst in through the front door, holding a vanilla folder and wearing an expression scrubbed clean of guilt. Mom, how are you feeling today? Want some tea? I'm tired, Nora whispered, her voice cracked and deliberately hollow. Lauren crouched beside her, patting her hand like she was a pet. You just rest. I'll handle everything. Nora gave a vague nod, pretending her eyelids were too heavy to hold. She watched through lowered lashes as Lauren slipped into the kitchen, folder tucked under her arm. Nora waited until she heard the microwave hum, then slowly sat upright and reached for her phone. She snapped a picture of the folder while Lauren's back was turned. The top tab read, Medical Evaluation, Suggested Guardianship Request, Drafted. Lauren returned a moment later, smile frozen and voice syrupy. Doctor, Kirsch thinks we should get a neuropsych eval soon. Nothing serious, just, paperwork. Nora coughed once, hard enough to seem unwell. If you think that's best. You trust me, don't you? Nora stared at her. Always. That night she pulled up the scanned photo on her phone and sent it to Greg. Within minutes he replied, Already filed a freeze order. No guardianship petition can proceed without a court hearing. You're safe. For now. For now. At 7:28 the next morning, Frank Maynard pulled into the driveway in a dusty Dodge pickup. He gave Nora a nod through the windshield and held up a small black case, brushed steel locks with anti-tamper cores. She opened the door for him, slowly, wincing just enough for Lauren, watching through the kitchen blinds, to notice. Behind her, Ben's car was gone. Nora whispered to Frank, We only changed the back and side entrances. Leave the front as it is, for now. You expecting a visit? He asked. She smiled. Number, I'm setting a trap. Frank raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Just got to work. By the time the sun dipped below the treetops, 2 new locks were in place, and an unexpected letter waited in Nora's mailbox, a sealed envelope with the return address blacked out in Sharpie. Inside, a photocopy of a second forged medical release. This one signed by a doctor Nora knew had been dead for 5 years. The morning was gray and hushed when Nora stepped out of the town car, leather gloves gripping her cane like it was a weapon. The air smelled of rain-soaked mulch and something faintly metallic, resentment, maybe. She moved up the walkway slowly, but with purpose. Frank's dusty Dodge was already idling at the curb, the engine ticking. She reached the front door, pulled out her old brass key, not because she thought it would work, but because she wanted proof. Click. Resistance. Again. Lauren had changed the locks. Again. Nora didn't knock. She simply turned and raised a hand to Frank, who was already walking toward her with his case in hand. "Let's do this quiet," she said, "but clean." Frank popped the lid on the black case and knelt at the door like a surgeon. "Still got the deed?" Nora tapped the manila folder under her arm. Inside were freshly stamped legal documents signed off less than 48 hours ago. She owned this house, solely. Frank worked fast, no small talk. By 7:11 a.m., the lock clicked and the door opened like it was bowing to her return. She stepped in. The house was quiet, but not empty. Ben's voice echoed faintly from upstairs. "It's early. Why would she be here now?" And then Lauren's. "She won't get in. I had everything changed yesterday. She doesn't even have a key anymore." Nora walked in, slow and deliberate, letting her cane strike the floor like punctuation. Tap, tap, tap. She reached the center of the living room and set the legal folder on the coffee table. Lauren appeared at the top of the stairs in an oversized hoodie and bare feet, frozen mid-step. "What the hell? How did you get in?" "I used my key," Nora said calmly. "The legal one." Ben stepped into view behind her, his face slack with disbelief. "You broke in," he said, voice tightening. "You can't be here." Nora opened the folder. "Actually, I can. This is the updated deed. Sole ownership notarized and on file with the county recorder's office as of yesterday." Lauren took a shaky step down. "This isn't your house anymore." "It never stopped being mine," Nora said. "You just hoped it would be easier to steal it than earn it." Ben pulled out his phone. "I'm calling the police." Nora tilted her head. "Please do. Greg said I should invite them myself." Ben hesitated. Nora reached into her coat pocket, pulled out a second document, and dropped it next to the deed. A printout of the fraudulent guardianship letter, complete with the forged signature of a doctor who'd been dead for 5 years. Lauren went still. "I don't think the local PD is going to be too amused by that," Nora said coolly. Ben glanced toward Lauren. "What's she talking about?" I didn't forge anything," Lauren stammered. Nora's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then you won't mind handing over my jewelry box." Lauren blinked. "What jewelry box?" "The one from the bedroom dresser. Top left drawer. Cherry wood. Lined with green velvet. The one that held my wedding ring." Lauren looked at Ben, then back at Nora. It must have been misplaced when we were cleaning." Nora stepped closer, her voice ice cold now. "It wasn't misplaced. You moved it. Just like you moved the will, the coins, the lockbox. Just like you walked into a life that wasn't yours and tried to gut it from the inside out." Frank cleared his throat softly. "You want me to relock the front door or leave it for now?" Nora didn't break eye contact with Lauren. "Leave it." She leaned in closer. "You changed the locks to keep me out," she whispered. "But now they keep you in." Ben's phone buzzed. He glanced down. His jaw tensed. Nora's eyes narrowed. "Who is it?" He looked up, pale. "It's the realtor. The one you hired." Nora's turn to smile. "Ah, good. She's early." Lauren spun toward the stairs. "What realtor?" "What do you mean she's early?" Nora stepped aside and gestured toward the front door. And as Lauren moved to intercept whoever was coming, someone else stepped through the open frame. Not Sharon, not the realtor, but a plainclothes detective. Badge out. Eyes locked on Lauren. "Lauren Matthews?" he said. "We need to talk." The front door was propped open with a brass stopper Nora hadn't seen in years, a gift from a neighbor after her husband's funeral. Today, it held space not for grief, but for leverage. By 10:02 a.m., Sharon McKee stood in the entryway, clipboard in hand, hair swept into a no-nonsense bun. The cash buyer trailed just behind her, late 40s, crisp navy blazer, soft southern accent, and the confident curiosity of someone who could close a deal before lunch. "This is the living room," Sharon said smoothly, gesturing toward the newly decluttered space. "The bones are original, 1940s, hardwood under the carpet. Foundations rock solid." Nora stood beside the fireplace, perfectly poised with her cane in one hand and a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And filled with 20 years of Thanksgiving dinners," she added, "the kind where nobody leaves until the pie burns." The buyer chuckled politely, clearly charmed. I love a place with a story. Nora nodded. This one has chapters. From the hallway, Lauren stood stiff, arms crossed like she'd just swallowed vinegar. She wore too much eyeliner for mourning and the pinched look of someone trying to act invisible in her own crime scene. "Mom!" she hissed as she passed. "Can we talk?" "In a moment," Nora said without turning. "Sharon, did you mention the study still has the original built-ins?" "I was just getting there." They moved down the hall. Nora's steps were slow but steady. The buyer followed, asking thoughtful questions. At every turn, Nora offered anecdotes instead of desperation, memories instead of price points. It was theater, but it was real. Lauren followed behind like a bad smell, trying to edge in, to interrupt. "This house isn't even—" she started. Nora's voice cut through without looking back. "Lauren, we agreed you'd stay out of the way today." "I didn't agree to anything." Nora turned, cane planted firmly between them. "Then let me be more clear. If you disrupt this sale, I'll file a restraining order, not temporary, permanent." Lauren flinched, then slinked back into the kitchen. In the dining room, Ben waited by the buffet table, arms folded. He gave the buyer a stiff smile, then stepped aside to whisper to Sharon. "Would be better for everyone if this deal didn't go through," he said under his breath. "Name your number." Sharon blinked. "Excuse me?" Ben slid a folded paper from his pocket. "You look like someone who knows when to pivot." She didn't take it. "I also know when to document a bribe." She pulled her phone from her blazer and snapped a photo before Ben could react. He cursed under his breath and backed away. At the foot of the stairs, Nora turned and spotted the exchange. She said nothing, just caught Sharon's eye, nodded once. Handled. They continued the tour upstairs, Nora gesturing to the empty guest room. "Used to be filled with dolls and drama. My granddaughter hated naps." The buyer smiled. "It feels preserved, honest. That's what makes it worth more than the asking price." He looked at Sharon. "I want it." "You haven't seen the basement," she said. "I don't need to. What's your seller looking for?" "Clean close, fast close, cash." He extended a hand. "Done. I'll have my team call by noon." As they stepped outside together, sunlight broke through the clouds, casting the walkway in soft gold. Inside, Lauren watched through the front window, her arms trembling at her sides. "That's not fair," she whispered. "She doesn't get to walk away with everything." But Nora wasn't walking away. She was walking through. Ben stood stiffly at the back of the room, jaw set, hands in fists. "She'll lose it all in court," he muttered. Lauren's eyes locked on him. "You'd better hope so." Back at the curb, Nora shook the buyer's hand and turned back toward the house. Sharon leaned in beside her. "There's something else," she whispered. "Your lawyer sent over the latest financials. They traced the forged ACH transfer." Nora blinked. "And?" Sharon handed her a printed summary. "The account it went to?" Lauren's name wasn't on it. Ben's was. The silence of the evening clung to the house like dust in the air, visible only when the light hit just right. Nora sat alone on the edge of her bed, the final sliver of sunset bleeding through the blinds. The printed bank summary lay beside her, Ben's name circled in red ink. But her mind wasn't on the paper. It was 20 years behind her. June 2005. Lauren had just turned 16, a girl with a sideways grin and a growing distance in her eyes. Back then, the lies were small. Shoplifting lip gloss from the Rite Aid, skipping class and forging signatures. Nora had caught her slipping a $20 bill from her purse one summer afternoon, back when the air still smelled like sunscreen and old garden roses. She'd stood in the kitchen doorway, frozen, watching her daughter's hand linger in her wallet like it belonged there. Lauren hadn't even flinched. When Nora confronted her, Lauren had smiled and said, "I thought you left it out for me." It wasn't the theft that stuck. It was the performance. Nora never told her husband. She'd quietly withdrawn the cash from her account every time it happened after that, leaving it in the top drawer with a note. For gas, for lunch, for whatever. She convinced herself it was love. That was her sin, not denial. Complicity. She'd made it easy. She reached toward the nightstand now and pulled open the drawer. Inside, folded behind the old birthday cards and prayer notes, was a yellowing envelope with her husband's handwriting. She opened it. The letter was brief, no more than 2 paragraphs, dated 6 months before his heart gave out on their back porch. Nora. I don't want to sound paranoid, but I see Lauren watching the house more than she watches us. I see her counting things, paintings, jewelry, mail that isn't hers. You love her. I do too. But please don't give her the deed unless I'm here to back you up. And if I'm not here, don't give her the house at all. Love you forever, T. Nora folded the letter slowly, careful not to tear the edge where his pen had pressed too hard on don't. She'd ignored that warning, had let the need for a relationship outweigh the reality of who Lauren had become. She remembered another moment now, one she hadn't let herself revisit in years. Lauren was 17. They were at a consignment shop in town. A local woman approached Nora at the register, quietly asking if the pearl necklace Lauren had just sold was hers. It had been. A gift from Nora's mother. Lauren denied everything, tearfully claiming it had been a similar piece she found in an old drawer. Nora had backed her up, lied to a stranger to protect her daughter from embarrassment. That was the last time she wore pearls. She stared now at her reflection in the bedroom mirror. Her hair was thinner. Her face had lines it hadn't earned from joy. She wasn't the woman who'd handed Lauren her wallet and called it forgiveness. She was something else now. Something forged, not broken. And yet, grief still pulsed under the surface like a bruise. You should have been better, she thought. And I should have stopped you before you learned how easy I was to lie to. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A message from Greg. We're ready to file criminal charges against Ben. Just say the word. Nora didn't answer. Not yet. Because something in her gut whispered this wasn't just about Ben and a few stolen wires. This went deeper. Longer. Lauren had been preparing for this con for years, and she hadn't done it alone. Nora stood slowly, walked to her closet, and pulled out an old storage box. Inside was a dusty VHS tape labeled 1998. Christmas morning, Lauren's first car. She slipped it into the ancient VCR still hooked to the guest room TV. As the grainy footage flickered to life, something caught her breath. A voice, off camera, male, distinct, familiar, not her husband's, Ben, at 17, in the house, smiling at Lauren like the plan had already begun. The house was quiet again, too quiet for how full it was with things unsaid. Nora sat in the sunroom, the late morning light filtering through the lace curtains, turning the air golden. Her tea had gone cold. Lauren hovered in the doorway, one bare foot tapping against the hardwood like a warning shot. You wanted to talk? Lauren asked, arms crossed, voice cool and tight. Nora didn't answer right away. She reached into the side drawer of the antique desk, pulled out a slim envelope and placed it gently on the table. I thought you might want to explain this before it explains itself to the authorities. Lauren glanced at it, then rolled her eyes. You're still reading into everything. It's a misunderstanding. It's a forged signature, Nora replied softly, on a guardianship petition, backdated, signed by a dead man. Lauren's nostrils flared. It was Ben's idea. He said it would keep things from getting messy. Nora tilted her head. He was 17 the first time he walked through this house. Christmas morning, 1998. You two have been planning for a long time, haven't you? Lauren blinked, thrown. Nora didn't wait for a response. She pulled out her phone, tapped a video file, and set it down. Audio filled the room, the familiar beeping of the ICU, then Lauren's voice, sharp and unkind. She won't make it. Let's start clearing the house. Lauren stiffened. You recorded me? She whispered. I survived because I did. The screen went dark. Nora picked the phone back up and slid it into her pocket. You knew I was awake. And you still said it out loud, she said, quieter now. You wanted me gone so badly you didn't even bother whispering. Lauren's voice cracked. Because you were gone. You left me long before the ICU. Don't pretend otherwise. You were always disappointed in me. You never believed I could handle anything without messing it up. And you proved me right, Nora said, not cruelly, but like it was a fact in a book they both now had to read. Lauren paced, her breathing ragged. You have no idea what it was like growing up here. Always second best. You treated Dad like a god and me like a guest. All I ever wanted was a shortcut, Nora interrupted. And now you're blaming me because you took one. Lauren froze. Nora stood, slowly, gripping the arm of the chair for support. You stole, you lied, you forged, and still you came back here thinking I'd just sit and drink tea while you stripped my life from the walls. Lauren's jaw trembled. I panicked, okay? I thought we were going to lose everything. We were broke. Ben's job fell through and— Don't, Nora said, voice steel. Don't confuse fear with intent. I've read every document. I've seen every transfer. You weren't trying to survive. You were trying to cash out. Lauren's shoulders slumped. Her face cracked open, a sudden switch from venom to tears. I'm sorry, okay? I'm so sorry. Nora stared at her for a long moment, searching her daughter's face for anything genuine. A trace of the girl who once handed her wildflowers wrapped in construction paper. But all she saw now was strategy wearing skin. No, she said. You're not. Lauren blinked. You're scared, Nora continued, voice steady. But you're not sorry. Nora turned and moved toward the hall. This isn't revenge, Lauren. Lauren followed, confused. Then what is it? Nora looked over her shoulder. It's prevention. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words landed harder than anything Lauren had expected. Behind her, the kitchen clock ticked louder than it should have. Lauren sank into the couch, speechless for once. Nora's phone buzzed in her pocket again. A text from Greg. Detective Clark just finished the fraud review. Ben's been subpoenaed. Lauren may be next. Nora slid the phone back into her pocket and walked toward the front door. And then she stopped. The jewelry box, her wedding set, was sitting on the entryway table. Open. Inside, the ring was missing, but a note had been left in its place. One word, printed in Ben's sharp handwriting. Soon. The teller's smile didn't reach her eyes. Nora knew that smile. It was the same one she used to give as a young receptionist when men talked over her like she was furniture. It meant, I'm being polite, but I see everything. Just one more signature here, Ms. Ashford, the woman said, sliding a form across the sleek granite desk. Nora signed without hesitation. Her signature, her real one, looped across the page with a steadiness that surprised even her. 2 bank accounts closed, 3 new ones opened. Old safety deposit box purged. New biometric vault access confirmed. The last of the documents tied to her husband's estate were now in her sole name. No co-signers, no emergency proxies. No room left for shadows to move. By noon, she was sitting in Greg's office, sipping chamomile tea from a paper cup that read, World's Okayest Client. He was grinning. You're ahead of the timeline, he said. Once the sale clears and the trust fund is finalized, you'll be insulated on all sides. And the forged ACH? Filed under federal review. Ben's going to have to talk fast and lie better than he ever has. Nora nodded, setting the cup down. Let him try. That afternoon, she updated every emergency contact, medical authorization, and power of attorney form. The woman at her doctor's office raised an eyebrow at how prepared she was. Just trying to keep my daughter from putting me in the ground twice, Nora quipped. The receptionist didn't laugh, but she got it. Back home, the sun was sinking. The kitchen was clean again, emptied of secrets. Nora had cleared the fridge, shredded old files, boxed up decades of forgotten habits. The only thing left was peace, and one last piece of rot. Her phone buzzed. A text from Cousin Janice. Lauren's been calling. Said you're unstable and that Ben's taking care of things. Thought you should know. Nora sat on the edge of the kitchen bench, thumbs moving fast. Tell her I'm fine, and tell her I'm coming for every lie she told in our family's name. Another buzz. This time, an alert from her credit monitoring service. New. Account opened in your name, applied through West Coast Federal Credit Union, $18,000 personal loan. Her mouth went dry. She logged in immediately. A quick trace showed the IP address, Santa Fe, matching the same alias used for the investor Lauren had mentioned weeks ago, but it wasn't in Lauren's name. It was in hers. She picked up the phone, dialed Greg. "I need a fraud freeze put on every credit bureau now, and a reverse investigation. Ben used my identity. Again." "On it," he said, no hesitation. Nora walked slowly back into the living room, the hardwood cool under her soles. She stared out the front window at the dusk-covered street. No one walked there anymore. Not neighbors, not family. Lauren had tried to poison the well behind her, calling every cousin, every in-law, begging for sympathy, spinning stories about mental decline, emotional manipulation, trauma. But Nora had already started calling first, quietly, calmly. "I'm not asking you to take sides," she'd told her sister-in-law. "I'm just asking you to watch what side they pull you toward." No one sided with Lauren. Not anymore. At 7:03 p.m., a car pulled up outside the house. Nora didn't recognize it, but something about the way it idled, engine running too long, made her step back from the curtain. She picked up her phone, hit record, stepped out onto the porch. The car didn't move. The tinted window rolled down just an inch. Inside, a hand slid a small envelope through the gap and let it fall to the ground before the car sped off, tires screeching as it took the corner hard. Nora waited, heart beating against her ribs like a warning bell. She walked slowly to the edge of the driveway, picked up the envelope and opened it with gloved hands. Inside, a photo of her wedding ring, still missing. Taped beside it, a typed message. "You should have stayed gone." It happened just after sunrise. A black and white squad car rolled up in front of Ben and Lauren's rental property, the dingy duplex on the outskirts of town where they'd scurried after Nora changed the locks and filed the deed. 2 officers stepped out, one with cuffs already out, the other holding a folded arrest warrant, like a final bill delivered to a dine-and-dash thief. Ben opened the door in basketball shorts and bare feet, bleary-eyed and annoyed. He didn't see the handcuffs until they clicked closed around his wrists. "Benjamin Todd Kessler?" the officer asked, though he already knew. Ben tried to smirk. "What's this about?" "Identity theft, wire fraud, credit fraud. You've been very busy." Lauren screamed as he was walked to the car. "This is harassment! He didn't do anything!" Ben's voice cracked as they shut the door behind him. "Get the lawyer! Tell them it's a misunderstanding!" But Nora had made sure there was no misunderstanding left. By 9 a.m., Greg had filed both criminal and civil motions. Nora wasn't just pressing charges. She was demanding restitution, court-ordered garnishment, and full financial discovery. Everything Ben owned, past or present, was now subject to legal review. By noon, the house sale had closed. Wire confirmation arrived from the title company. Nora's account was now flush with 6 figures. No liens, no debt, no co-owners. The house she'd nearly died trying to protect was no longer at risk. At 2:30 p.m., a court courier arrived with a tan envelope and left without knocking. Inside, the final court order for eviction. Matthews, Lauren, removed from property, no access to residence or mail as of 6 a.m. tomorrow. Nora stared at the date. It was real. It was now. She printed 2 copies, one for the foyer, one for the front gate. That night she opened a bottle of wine her husband had been saving since their 30th anniversary. She poured 1 glass, sat in the quiet, let herself breathe without counting the lies left to clean up. But safety, she knew, was temporary. She hired a private security firm the next morning, veterans, all local, none flashy. They installed a wireless camera system, set up motion sensors along the back perimeter, and placed a discreet panic button beneath the living room end table. "This won't be permanent," she told the lead guard, a retired state trooper with a gentle face and thick wrists. "No, ma'am," he said, "just until they learn to stop testing the fire." That same day, Nora met with her estate attorney and made the changes she'd put off too long. Lauren's name was removed from her will, officially, irrevocably. In its place, a non-profit trust for elder justice, a scholarship fund for low-income caregivers, and 1 quiet bequest to her niece in Portland, the only relative who'd believed her from the beginning. As she signed the documents, she looked up at her attorney. "That's the last time her name appears in anything tied to me." The attorney nodded. "We'll backdate a notice to prevent any probate contest. It's ironclad." By evening, the house was still. No more shouting, no more fake apologies, no more battles over breakfast. Tables. But the peace didn't feel like victory. It felt like residue. Nora walked the upstairs hallway in socks, tracing her fingers along the clean walls. The air was sharp with fresh paint. The floors finally didn't creak where the weight of betrayal used to sit. At 11:42 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She hesitated, then picked it up. There was no voice, only breathing, slow, deliberate. Then, a sound she hadn't heard in years, the faint scrape of the jewelry box's latch. She froze. Then the line went dead. Nora stared at the screen. No call log. No trace. She stepped to the window, eyes scanning the front lawn, the driveway, the streetlight down the block that flickered every 9 seconds. Nothing. She turned back toward the kitchen and saw it. On the counter. Not the ring, but the ceramic jar. The one Ben had pawned, returned, and empty. Nora didn't sleep that night, not really. She just moved from room to room like a lighthouse beam, checking locks, reviewing camera footage, rereading legal docs she'd already committed to memory. By morning, the ceramic jar still sat on the counter, untouched, empty, like a dare. At 6:12 a.m., she brewed strong coffee, opened her laptop, and began to type. She didn't write it like a victim. She wrote it like a ledger, a sequence of events, medical lies, forged signatures, a daughter's betrayal, a son-in-law's theft, a house nearly stolen, a life nearly buried while still breathing. She posted the story on a community forum for elder abuse survivors under her full name, no aliases, no redactions. By 9 a.m., the post had gone viral within the county. By noon, a reporter from the local ABC affiliate was parked in her driveway with a camera crew and a mic. She almost turned them away. But then she remembered the women in her grief group, the ones with stories like hers but no proof, no power, no paper trail, just dread. So she said yes. Nora sat on her front porch in a slate blue cardigan, her wedding ring still absent, her voice clear as steel in the air. "They expected me to stay quiet or die," she told the reporter, "but I recovered, and I remembered everything." The footage ran that night on the evening news. Elder abuse survivor reclaims home from family fraud. Charges filed against daughter and son-in-law. They played audio from the ICU recording, the clip where Lauren said, "She won't make it. Let's just start clearing the house." They blurred her face but didn't hide her name. Lauren's social circle collapsed by midnight. The wellness blog she'd guest written for pulled her articles. Her LinkedIn disappeared. Her old friends from college left comments under the news story like digital landmines. "This explains a lot. She always played the victim." Wow. Ben's face appeared in the background of the courtroom sketch the next morning, shoulders hunched, eyes sunk deep into his skull. By the end of the week, Nora had received over 100 emails, some from strangers in her town, others from across the country. "Thank you. My sister tried to do the same to our mother. We couldn't prove it. I thought I was the only one." One letter arrived in a lavender envelope with no return address. Inside was a Polaroid of a young woman with bright red glasses, standing on a beach. On the back, "You probably don't remember me, but I remember you. Aunt Nora, I'm proud of you. Mira." She hadn't heard from Mira, her brother's estranged daughter, in 15 years. The last she knew, the girl had run off to Oregon with a backpack and a poetry journal. Nora pulled out a pen and wrote her first letter back in decades. By the next afternoon, she had another visitor. Not press, not police. A social worker from a nearby hospice facility named Delilah, mid-30s, glasses, denim skirt, nerves and fire stitched into her handshake. "I read your post," Delilah said. "The trust fund you mentioned, was that real?" Nora nodded. "Very. But only for real caregivers, not ones who show up for checks and photo ops." Delilah's eyes welled. "Then we should talk. There are more women like you, ones still stuck, ones who didn't get to walk out." So they talked. And as they talked, Nora began drafting the mission statement for the Resilience Trust, a legal fund for elderly victims of familial financial abuse, built not just to fight back but to make sure someone else doesn't have to. At dusk, Nora stood on her porch alone, watching the sun collapse into the western trees. And then she noticed something, an envelope, tucked between the slats of the railing. She bent down slowly, unfolded it with steady fingers. Inside was a black and white photocopy of her wedding ring. Again. But this time, beneath the photo, there were 4 words in block letters. "See you in court." The courthouse air was heavy with recycled air and tension. Nora sat upright at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her cardigan was pressed, her gray hair pulled back into a low, clean knot. She looked every inch the woman Lauren had tried to erase, and somehow more formidable for having survived it. Across from her sat Lauren, jaw clenched, hair tied too tightly, eyes darting toward every corner of the room like an animal watching for exits. Her lawyer, a young man who looked more like a closing intern than a litigator, adjusted his tie nervously. The judge entered. All rise. Everyone stood, except Ben. He wasn't there. His attorney had filed a no-contest plea in exchange for reduced sentencing. His absence was both expected and cowardly. Lauren's lawyer began with a polished, trembling introduction. Mental confusion, miscommunication, stress during a medical emergency. "My client," he said, "acted with love. Misguided, perhaps, but not criminal." Then it was Greg's turn. He stood slowly, walked toward the center of the courtroom, and tapped a small laptop. The screen on the evidence monitor came to life. It was the ICU, muted beeping, white sheets, Nora's body frail but alive, and then Lauren's voice, unfiltered. "She won't make it. Let's just start clearing the house." There was a visible ripple through the courtroom. Even the stenographer's fingers slowed. Greg let the words hang in the air before pressing pause. That was recorded at 6:42 a.m., 3 days before Ms. Matthews filed for emergency guardianship and forged medical authorization under the name of a deceased physician. Lauren's lawyer objected. "The tape lacks context." "Context?" Greg raised an eyebrow. "Would you like some?" He nodded to the back of the room. From the gallery, a woman in pale blue scrubs stood up. Her ID badge caught the overhead lights as she walked to the stand. Nurse Kayla Tillman, ICU shift supervisor at St. Gertrude's. Sworn in. Greg approached her. "You were working the morning of March 2nd? "Yes." "Did Ms. Matthews request to speak to staff about Ms. Ashford's condition?" "She did, twice. She asked if the machines could be turned off, said Nora had given up. I told her that wasn't our call to make." "And Nora, was she responsive?" "She blinked, reacted to sound. We noted it in her chart. She wasn't brain dead, just quiet. Aware. Would you call her incapable?" "Not by any legal standard, I know." Greg let that settle before stepping back. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Matthews, would you like to speak before I render judgment?" Lauren stood. "I just wanted what was best. My mom she was gone, and Ben, he said we needed to protect what was left." "Did you protect it?" the judge asked. "Or did you try to strip it down while she was still warm?" Lauren's mouth opened, but nothing came out. The judge continued, "This isn't a probate dispute. This is elder fraud. This is manipulation. And based on the evidence and testimony, I find in favor of Ms. Ashford on all claims. The countersuit is dismissed, with prejudice." He slammed the gavel. "In addition, Ms. Matthews is fined $75,000 in restitution and barred from acting in any legal or financial capacity for any family member, present or future." Lauren dropped into her seat like a puppet with its strings cut. Cameras flashed outside the courtroom. A local journalist whispered, "Hero Grandma wins!" Nora didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just breathed. The kind of breath that had been locked inside her since the first whisper in the ICU. As she walked out of the courtroom, Greg leaned in. "You did it." "No," Nora replied. "I survived it." But as they reached the hallway, a court clerk jogged after them. "Ms. Ashford?" she called. Nora turned. The clerk held a small padded envelope. "This was dropped off at the front desk this morning. No name, no return address, but it had your case number written on the corner." Nora took it. Her fingers trembled as she peeled it open. Inside was a key, small, brass, not hers, and underneath it, a folded receipt. One-way bus ticket. Departure. Portland. Purchased under the name Mira Kessler. The morning after court, the air in the house felt different. Not lighter, just rearranged, like a room after guests have left. Empty chairs, full silence. Nora stood in the guest room with a cardboard box she hadn't touched in years. Her palms hesitated over the flaps. Her fingers were swollen from sleep and age, but not indecision. She peeled the tape back slowly. Inside, yellowing photo albums, a bundle of dried baby's breath, and an envelope labeled Lauren, 1992. She opened it. Inside was a Polaroid. Lauren at 5, standing in the garden, cheeks round with laughter. Nora crouched behind her, arms wrapped around her daughter, both of them smiling, genuinely. No artifice, just sunlight, clover, and the necklace. The one Nora wore only once, the one Ben had pawned. It glinted in the photo's corner, a teardrop sapphire on a silver chain, given to her the day of their wedding by her grandmother. It was meant to be passed down, to mark beginnings. But it had become collateral. Nora sat on the floor and let the image rest on her knees. She didn't cry. Not at first. It wasn't a clean breakdown. It came in strange gasps, half sob, half laugh. She leaned against the edge of the bed frame and let it happen, shaking silently. 20 years of trying, 20 more of covering. And still, here she was, grieving a daughter who was technically alive, but emotionally buried in betrayal. When it passed, she wiped her cheeks with the sleeve of her sweater and whispered aloud, "You didn't destroy me. But you didn't have to try so hard." She reached again into the box and pulled out a small spiral notebook, plain, leather-bound, never used. She turned to the first page. Blank. She uncapped a pen. At the top she wrote, "What They Steal When They Smile, One Woman's Story of Surviving Family Fraud." She stared at it for a long time. The title felt heavy, but right. Not a memoir exactly, not vengeance, just the truth, spoken so someone else wouldn't mistake silence for safety. Later that afternoon, Sharon dropped by with the final buyer paperwork and a housewarming basket for the new owners. They were moving in next week. Young couple from Santa Fe. No kids yet. Just dreams and drywall to repair. "They want to keep the front porch bench," Sharon said. "Said it felt like the heart of the house." Nora smiled faintly. "It was always where the arguments ended." Sharon paused, then said, "They asked about a name for the place." "Something to etch into the mailbox." Nora thought for a moment, then nodded. "Call it resilience." That night, Nora stood in the kitchen, turning the brass key from the court envelope over in her hand. Mira's ticket had been scanned 2 hours ago. Destination? Portland. No reply to Nora's letter yet, but the key was something. A signpost, maybe a beginning. She slipped the key onto a string and hung it on the refrigerator knob. Not locked away. Just present. A soft chime sounded from the front of the house. Motion camera alert. She checked her phone. Just a raccoon nosing at the bird bath. Still, she double-checked the doors. Old habits. As she walked back through the hallway, she glanced into the mirror. She looked older, but not smaller. There was a photo stuck to the edge of the frame now. Mira's beach Polaroid. Underneath it, a post-it she'd added in her own handwriting. "Heal loud. Someone else needs the noise." She reached up and pressed the note flat. Then, from outside, 3 sharp knocks. Not the door, the back window. She froze. The knock never came again. By the time Nora made it to the back window, the yard was empty. No footprints, no lingering sound, just wind brushing against the fence like it had somewhere better to be. The silence lingered too long, thick as fog, but Nora didn't open the door. She didn't need to chase shadows anymore. By morning, the house was quiet, not tense, not waiting, just still, a stillness that felt earned. She walked barefoot through each room, the hardwood cool beneath her heels. Her cane leaned against the wall. She hadn't needed it since court, though she still carried it in public. Perception, after all, was half the defense. The dining room echoed. The table was gone, sold with the house. Only a faint sun-bleached outline remained where the centerpiece had once sat, an old ceramic rooster her husband used to tease her about. In the living room, she paused by the mantel, touching the empty nail where the family portrait had once hung. She'd left it boxed in the attic, labeled but unclaimed. Not everything deserved display. At the base of the stairs, she turned, hand brushing the railing one final time. The doorbell rang. This time it was the couple from Santa Fe, the new owners. She opened the door with the same key Lauren had once tried to steal, then changed, then lost control of. Nora offered it now with an open palm. The young woman took it gently. "We love it already," she said. "It's a house that remembers," Nora replied. "It holds things. Just make sure what you bring into it is kind." They nodded, eyes shining. They asked for a walkthrough just to be sure. Nora obliged. She showed them the creaky floorboard near the back of the pantry, the loose latch on the attic stairs, the breaker that always needed a second flip in the spring. She didn't mention the nights she'd cried alone in the kitchen, or the time she'd pretended to forget her own name so Lauren would leave her in peace. Those belonged to her, not the house. At the end, she stood on the front porch as they locked up behind her. "Good luck," the man said. Nora nodded. "It's not luck, it's vigilance." And then she left. 2 days later, Nora stood behind a podium in a conference room at the downtown Hyatt. The banner behind her read, "Elder Rights Now, Protecting Autonomy and Assets in a Silent Epidemic." The crowd wasn't large, but it was attentive. Mostly women. Some men. Some walking with canes. Others wheeling oxygen tanks or holding photos of someone they'd already lost to the same betrayal Nora had outlived. She didn't speak like an expert. She spoke like a survivor. You think it'll come from a stranger, that it'll be loud, sudden. But betrayal from family doesn't knock. It lets itself in, uses your coffee mug, and whispers that you're imagining things. Laughter. Dry, bitter, shared. She held up the spiral-bound notebook she'd started at home. This story isn't unique. And that's the tragedy. Afterward, people lined up just to hold her hand. A woman with a cane hugged her so tightly, Nora nearly lost her breath. A man in a veteran's cap pressed an old photograph into her palm and whispered, "My brother tried the same thing." No one believed me. That night, back in her rental apartment, modest, bright, 2 stories of peace, Nora set her notebook on the kitchen counter and opened to the final page. She wrote, "You can survive the people who want you gone. You just have to outlive them, with receipts." She closed the notebook, tapped her finger once against the cover, and smiled. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small key. Brass, unmarked. She placed it in the drawer beside her tea bags, right where she'd keep it if she ever needed to unlock anything again. Just in case.